And I would sit down with teens today and ask them, what do they think? Do you think there are some ways that ChatGPT could actually be creating problems? Does it, in fact, cause laziness or the lack of discernment? I would love to have those conversations with young people today.
Growing up, I always wanted a cheat code for homework. I just wanted something that could help me do it faster. Kids today have cheat codes. It's called ChatGPT. And what we're finding is that kids actually don't think that other kids or even themselves should use ChatGPT for their own homework. They think that it actually might be cheating. But isn't it just a tool like Clippy from our Microsoft Word days when we were writing papers or resumes? Navigating technology can really be such a dark place. But today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy gives us some important insights and helps us think well about this topic. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, the share of teens who say they use ChatGPT for their schoolwork has risen to 26%. That's according to a Pew Research Center survey of U.S. teens ages 13 to 17, and that's up from 13% in 2023. Just over half of teens say it's acceptable to use ChatGPT to research new topics. It's around 54%, according to the research. Only 9% say it's not acceptable to use it for this. And now far fewer are using the chatbot to do math or write essays. And some of the research in this area is kind of interesting. 28% say it's not acceptable to use ChatGPT for math problems. And 42% say it's not acceptable to use ChatGPT to write essays. Dr. Kathy, I think this is a really interesting topic because I teach at a school and I've actually gone back to school too. I'm a student as well. And it seems like around every corner in academia, there's a lot of people that feel threatened by ChatGPT and some different AI tools for students that specifically are using it for things like writing and math because they don't have to think as hard, right? Why should we be concerned about ChatGPT for kids and schools? And why should this be something that's on our radar?
That's the exact reason. My biggest fear is that they're not thinking as hard, or maybe they're not thinking at all. My fear might be that they would ask ChatGPT to create something and they would accept it as is. They wouldn't even discern, is that similar to what I would have said? Do I even think that that's accurate? Is that the perspective my teacher would want me to take? So I think it could breed laziness. I think it can breed a lack of personal commitment to ideas. So it's not just thinking, it's the fact that these are my thoughts. Like if students don't know what they're capable of and how their thoughts are different from Peter's and Sam's, I think we're in trouble. So it does concern me.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Dr. Kathy, too, when you do some research into it, because they say that things like AI and ChatGPT, they have what some are calling AI amnesia, where they just kind of forget what they're talking about and just kind of go on. It's a little bit like a 16-year-old boy that just forgets what he's talking about and starts to make things up. But it's kind of interesting, though, because I think sometimes really these things are incredible tools. They're incredibly powerful. They help you reframe, ideas or ways to communicate and can be really helpful. I almost see it almost like that paperclip guy from the Microsoft Word thing, right? Like, I think we called him Clippy when I was in high school, that if I needed help, like writing an essay or it seems like I would always put up here, right? Like, it seems like you're writing a resume, and then it would give you helps to do that thing. It was really helpful for me in that time period, right? But it almost feels like ChatGPT and some of these things are just that, right? Should we encourage our kids to use some of these helps? Because I'll just be honest, Clippy was really helpful for me in that moment. And I feel like ChatGPT can be too. Is it important for our kids to know about these tools and understand how to use them?
I understand how to use them. Great question. Because, we'd be foolish to say that they shouldn't know anything about them. They're probably here to stay, probably with refinements and things that we would consider to be really good and healthy. But how do you use them well? Because it's interesting, isn't it, that 28% said don't use them for math. They would consider it cheating, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. You can ask Siri on the phone, what is 8 plus 4? And Siri will tell you.
Right.
So it looks like they maybe consider that cheating. And to write an essay. So to write a whole essay, 42% said it's not acceptable. Now, where I think the encouragement to use it could be in what are 5 excellent sources of truth for this and that? Then maybe I don't know enough actually about ChatGPT if it would even tell us that. So yeah, let's encourage them to use, like I couldn't write books without the thesaurus online. I couldn't do some of the Bible work I do without Bible Gateway and BibleHub.com. Those are not cheating things. Those are resources that we have at our disposal. Do I think Jesus would use them today? Yes, because I don't think he'd let the devil have the only access. So I think even Jesus would use them.
Yeah, I love that. That's really fun, Dr. Kathy. I think that one of the other hard realities for us as we think through this topic is something that we've talked about here, and that's how AI really changes our perception of things. It changes our perception of like the purpose of writing a paper, where many of us think that the purpose of writing a paper is to get a grade, right, because of school. Or in reality, the purpose of writing a paper is to practice organizing thought in an organized fashion. And even the idea of like, what is the purpose of mathematics, in solving a math problem? It's not to solve the problem. It's to build resiliency for solving problems that you're going to have later on in life, right? So that's what I tell my kids all the time about why they're doing math. Why do they have to study algebra? Why do they have to study these other things? It's not a discipline in getting the problem, correct. I mean, that is a little bit of what we want, right? But the outcome is totally different. We're trying to build muscles to engage it. I think that for many of us, when we look at AI, there's a big challenge because of how we now perceive, not just knowledge and information, but also relationship between the knowledge and information and real life. And I would even say perceive the purpose of these relationships. Is it to get kind of an expected, outcome here so that I have the right thing? So the purpose of my even like friendships and my human relationships are really to drive me towards this sense of I get something out of this friendship, not I have long suffering and I treat them like an image bearer, right? So sometimes, and I'm taking this totally philosophical, but I don't think it's that far off, AI changes our perception of the relationship with everything. It impacts not only knowledge relationship, but it can also impact how we look at our relationships with other humans. So kind of with that, how would you recommend us as parents to really engage our kids so that we're not really chasing away these things like these cyber robots that are kind of around, but we're also not just kind of people that don't want this technology ever. And we just, I don't know, put tinfoil hats on and avoid all the technology movements. How do we help guide our kids towards real reality and not allow AI to reframe our perception of what is really real?
That's fascinating. Man, I love the way you think. One thing that comes to mind is that parents and grandparents need to let their children and grandchildren teach them about ChatGPT. So unless you have a career or a ministry where you're using it, and maybe you have we're part of a team to create a policy for how your company would not use ChatGPT, you might have real information. But if you don't, ask your kids, what have you heard about it? How are you learning it? What are your teachers teaching you? And then what do you know about it, and teach your kids. So if you are in a corporate setting or a church ministry and there's a policy, I mean, universities have policies. I've talked with professors who are having a terrible time trying to keep up to date with, the cheat engines to try to figure out who did actually use ChatGPT. So I think we have discussions, right? We say here all the time, Wayne, that we should ideally know things that we would then not be surprised by the conversations we'd be having with our kids, so that we can present truth, not in our opinion, because you don't want always your opinions to lead you, but based on my understanding, these are reasons to avoid it and reasons to use it well. And I would sit down with teens today and ask them, what do they think? What do you see as a good use? Do you think that it could provide solutions to problems? And do you think there are some ways that ChatGPT could actually be creating problems? Does it give access to information to the wrong people? Does it, in fact, cause laziness or the lack of discernment? I would love to have those conversations with young people today.
I really appreciated Dr. Kathy's insights today. It actually reminded me of a passage that comes out of 1 Kings chapter 22, and I'll begin reading at verse 19. Micaiah continued, "Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the multitudes of heaven standing around him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and go to his death there? One suggested this and another that. Finally, a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, I will entice him. By what means? Asked the Lord. I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all the prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it. So now the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of the prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. This is kind of a funny passage inside of the history of Israel. King Ahab of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah were considering going to battle at Ramoth Gilead, and Ahab's prophets all predicted victory. But Jehoshaphat wanted a true prophet of the Lord, and Micaiah was summoned. But Ahab despised him because he usually prophesied disaster. Micaiah was shown a heavenly scene in which a lying spirit entices Ahab's prophets to really declare success. Yet the real truth from God was that Ahab would be defeated, and Micaiah spoke God's perspective, even though it was really unpopular and dangerous. Micaiah trusted God's reality over the illusions of the false prophet, standing alone against overwhelming pressure. He clung to God's word. In essence, Micaiah's testimony reminds us that God's truth is really what's real, even when the majority sees something different. It's so easy in the digital age to just want to go with whatever feels good or whatever kind of looks good or whatever is actually the easy road. But I think this story from Micaiah is really a unique perspective. It gives an idea that there are so many different wavering perspectives out there that people can really search after. You can find really almost anything that tells you what you want to hear. But at the end of the day, you have to come down to one hard truth. What does God say? What is God's decree? What is God's order or organization for us as humans? And I think teaching our kids, rather than to look to technology or AI just to get the answer that we feel like we need, or the answer that we feel like the teacher should have, or all of those things, we need to build muscles in our kids that call them to go and actually seek out what God says. And what is God calling us to in these different moments? More than having the right answer, it's having the right muscles. And I think pursuing that with our kids can really be a bright light that shines and cuts through some dark times that undoubtedly they're going to face. Well, now on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. Thanks for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment Facing the Dark. We're so glad that you're listening with us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.